Welcome to the Sunflower Rising podcast, where we explore what happens when our raw, messy humanness collides with the boundless grace of Jesus Christ. For too long, the 12 steps have been seen as something reserved only for drugs or alcohol. But here, we're breaking that stigma wide open. These steps are a pathway to surrender, healing, and freedom for everything life throws at us with Jesus right at the center. It's about progress, not perfection. I'm Nikki.
And I'm Rianne.
And we're thrilled that you're here. Pull up a chair, let's rise together, and remember to always face the sunlight.
All right, so I'd like to go ahead and introduce our guest we have here today. We are being joined on Sunflower Rising podcast by Autumn. She was supposed to be a part of a 2-speaker guest appearance today, but her sister got sick with the flu, and she got left having to do the whole entire thing by herself, which is pushing her way outside her comfort zone. So I just want to tell her thank you and welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here. I'm excited.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I know this was not on the top of your bucket list or something that you were super excited to do, but I think that you have a powerful testimony and a powerful thing just to be able to use your voice to tell your story with no pressure. God's just going to use you.
Happy to do new things. So
Great. And it's all by obedience, right?
I guess so. Obedient to my mother. Honor your mother and father. That's what the Bible says.
Heck yeah. I have to use that one to my glory and my privilege.
I think Colossians 3:20 says, obey your parents. So
Right,
I taught my son that.
And that's how you ended up here today.
I taught my little 4-year-old that.
Well, I love it. So what was it like, your mom having to ask you to come on here and do this? What were your initial thoughts or your initial reactions?
Well, probably what are we going to talk about? And I think you said me, like my testimony, my story, and that's whenever I was like pretty hesitant, like, no thank you. Maybe next year. No thanks. So that's probably how I responded.
Yeah. Which, I think it's wonderful because the premise that I took away from that, or what I thought, is you don't walk away with a lot of trauma or hurts or baggage that you're carrying from your childhood that came from being raised by a mom and dad that struggled with drugs and alcohol and just doing any and everything that they wanted to do in life, sometimes with no regard for other people. But I think that's a little more impactful than we might realize because it's not the norm. It's not the high percentage of people walking away and just be like, that was my childhood. I chose not to be like that. I chose not to live like that or let it be part of my story. And then you've submitted your life to Christ and to God and you've just moved forward. So I think a lot of people will be very intrigued on, well, how are you able to do that? How are you able to not become that percentage of letting your parents' past dictate anything about your future or your present?
Mm-hmm. Oh, we shall see.
Yeah. So go ahead and if you will just, we've referred to me as your mom, you're my daughter, but who's a little bit about you? Like, who is Autumn today? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a Jesus follower, wife, mama, daughter, sister, friend, foe. I don't know. I've got 2 kids, a 4-year-old boy and a almost 2-year-old girl, a husband. I'm a stay-at-home mom.
That's great. Do you work it all outside the home?
I work for my church as the nursery coordinator, and so I spend some of my week up there on, usually on Thursdays I'll go up there and we have a team meeting, and then I clean up the nursery and restock it and organize, and maybe sometimes I'll use that time to do the schedule, or I'll do that throughout the week, and then I also do photography with some of my free time if I have any free time with my husband home. So
how did you become a photographer? How did that come about?
I don't know. I think I just felt like I was interested in it and intrigued by it all throughout, middle school and high school. It was always like, oh, that's interesting. I never took a class, but I was always intrigued by it. And then one day I just decided, I want to get a camera and try. And whenever I tried, I just was bad at it, but then liked it. So I just kept trying it and I got good at it. So
I know I've always told you that was something I noticed about you. I'd walk by your room one day and I'd be like, what is that weird sound coming out of your bedroom? And you're in there teaching yourself French or something?
Or harmonica or sign language, which that didn't make any noise. Or, I had just a few hobbies here and there, but nothing ever really lasted. I think photography would be my hobby that lasted the longest.
Right. But I love the fact that you're always just inquisitive or always wanting to learn something new and trying something new and just put yourself out there and just like, hey, I'm intrigued by this. So I'm going to get in and I'm going to learn and I'm going to figure it out. Whether it was life passion or just a hobby or just a fleeting thing that just came and went, you were always into something. So that was really great. I always love that about you.
Yeah, just curious and just curious, I guess.
Awesome. I love that. How long have you been married?
So 6 years, but this year in October we'll have been together for 10 years.
Amazing.
We met when I was 16, 26 in March. I'll turn 26 in March. So right after we get married is my birthday.
Awesome.
I'm not romantic. I'm not sentimental, but it also means I don't have this expectation or pressure on my husband to be romantic or sentimental, which he leans more that way, but also not super.
Well, I think I've always made the joke that you married the male version of your mom.
Which is not, I disagree. I'm like, you guys are so different in my
think so?
opinion, but yeah, I think
always
they're
thought
very
we were
different.
very similar.
He's just more like, more sentimental than I am, but I don't,
Yeah.
he's not super.
Well, I know as your mother watching you with your husband and your relationship and your marriage develop, I don't think I could have picked a better match for you. I think you have an amazing husband, and I'm so grateful that he's the father of my grandkids and that he is your husband, because it almost makes life a little bit safer knowing that you're under his care.
Yeah,
and
only
he's
God
caring
knew.
and
Only
taking care
God
of
could
you.
ordain that.
Yeah.
That's for a fact.
Is there any part of that story or that journey with you guys becoming together that you would want to share that sticks out?
Well, we started dating whenever I was 16, and there was this quote like flying around Instagram or Facebook where it's like, I married this man whenever he was just potential, and like, thank God I did. And I'm like, oh, I relate to that, because he was just a boy at the time, and he's grown up. The Lord has sanctified him and grown him and matured him so much. That's like, goodness, what a beautiful thing that the Lord has done in our marriage and our relationship to bless it. Just because different lifestyles, different home environments, raised just differently. He could have turned out way different than he did, and so what a blessing that he turned out to be such an amazing man of God. And that was a priority for me whenever I was dating him, was a man that loved God. But throughout our relationship, we've both grown deeper in our faith to just put God first.
Yeah.
Before each other. We probably would have been putting each other first most of our relationship.
Right. I think a lot of times in the world, what we hear today is people get in a relationship looking for a partner or somebody that makes them happy. They're always looking for what's in this person that I want, that I need, that's going to make me happy. But when you're in a relationship that you've submitted to Christ, it's not about we're in this because you're going to complete me or make me happy. We both stay focused on Christ and we stay centered on Christ. And then what overflows from that is what goes to our partner, or we give to our partner. So it just makes, I think it makes for a better relationship or a happy relationship, because there's not an unrealistic expectation that he's responsible for your happiness.
Yeah, and whenever we were so young, whenever we started dating and then like committed to each other and like got married, I was 19 when we got married, and so it is God's grace that it turned out so beautiful and holy, because maybe holiness wouldn't have been our number one priority. Happiness would have been our number one priority.
Right.
And happiness is fleeting. So to have a relationship that prioritizes holiness in the center is definitely God's grace to me and to him.
Yeah. I know, I love how you said that happiness is fleeting, because when we had sat down and did a little prep, because, my daughter here, the difference of me is very wants to know, be prepared, very logical, analytical, just give me all the information so that I don't have any surprises or any unknowns, because you like to be prepared. And one of the questions that was on there that we were bouncing back and forth that we were wondering if we wanted to use or ask is, well, what brings you joy? And you struggled with that question. You're like, joy is a state of being. Like, nothing brings you joy. You have to choose to be joyful. You choose to be joyful or not, depending on your circumstances
Right.
or what's going on. So I think it's funny how you just it's just so natural for you. You had said, well, happiness is fleeting.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's hard for me to say, like, well, what's bringing me joy? Because, like, life can be difficult and uncertain, and to be like, oh, I'm in a rough season, a transitional season, but I can still feel joy because it's not based on my circumstances. And so it's like, well, some things make me happy. Sure, some things bring me joy, but it is, like, no matter what's going on, you can still find joy.
Right.
And so that I was like, I just overthink. That's also just my personality of like overthinking, like, well, this question would be hard for me to answer because joy is like, yeah, joy is like from the Lord, and it's because Christ lives in me, not because of what I'm doing.
Right.
So-
And then your dad enters the
but
picture.
some things can be joyful, and you can find joy in things you do. I'm sure it's just like me overthinking. So,
No, but I think that's beautiful. I think it's great. So we've kind of prefaced a little bit, or we talked a little bit about, you know, us, our relationship, God, just to getting to know each other. Now, if you were to reflect or think about in your childhood, do you feel like God was prevalent or anywhere in your childhood? How was that for you when you were younger?
I we didn't grow up in church, and you guys didn't talk about God. And I actually had this thought the other day of like, did my parents believe in God? Were they atheists? Like, I'm just curious, like, what that would have looked like. Obviously they didn't have like a faith, but did they believe in a higher power? Like, I just didn't know those things. And so I have this memory of being outside and playing and talking with one of the neighbors, and just we're just talking about heaven and hell because everyone knows about heaven and hell, you know? And I'm like, oh, I believe in heaven. I do not believe in hell because I do not want to go to hell. And so, like, that was just my understanding of, like, there was no, I was never mad at God. I never had expectations of God to show up and do anything. Like, there was no, like, cry for help to God because he was not a source in our house. He was not a source for me to know. I don't think that I ever prayed to God, like, I do remember reading a children's Bible. I had this, I don't know who gave it to me, and I actually had two Bibles. I remember like reading the Adam and Eve story. I can see the picture in my head.
I'd almost think if I could go back to reflect, I don't remember 100%, but I bet you it probably came from Uncle Mike.
Maybe. I just remember reading this children's Bible and just reading the story, but I think maybe I thought it was just a story. I didn't know it was the first humans on Earth. I didn't know it was the creation story of the world. And I had a nightlight Bible as well, like a nighttime Bible. And I think I remember you guys reading it to me sometimes because I wanted you to. But again, I didn't know that it was anything other than a story or anything other than a book. I didn't know that it had like life-giving power in it.
No context.
Yeah,
Really?
I had no context. And so we would go to California, and my Nana she goes to church, and so we'd go to church with my Nana, and I don't remember retaining anything, absorbing anything, just knowing like, oh, my Nana's a church lady, you know, like you just know like some people go to church, some people don't. I just had no knowledge or understanding or expectation on God. And so when we're experiencing different things of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, violence, just uncertainty, I just remember feeling like maybe unsettled, scared. I have my sister, we're talking to each other, you know, but there was never like, God, help me, God, where are you? You know, there was never this like feeling that God is absent. I just didn't have any expectation on God.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring up Nana, and when we go to California and we go to church, and we only did that because she wanted it. We didn't have God in our life at the time. It was like, let's just go. It'll just make Nana happy.
Yeah.
You know, but
my father grew up in church.
Correct.
And maybe he was didn't believe in God less than you did. You know, I don't know.
Correct.
Like you didn't grow up in church, right?
I went to church off and on when I was younger with my mother. I'd say probably about between 7 to 9. On Sundays, she would still put me on the bus, and I'd go to a church called Midway Baptist, and I absolutely loved it. But I just loved the social part. I loved going to see people. I don't have nothing about that time of my life that stood out, or I think, oh, that Sunday school teacher said this, or like, there's just absolutely nothing. I just love to go see the people and hang out with the people. In Georgia, when I was in fifth and sixth grade, I went to church with my Aunt Marie, and that was also, I love to be with my family. And then we had a big, huge lunch, Sunday lunch. Everybody for family got together at Aunt Marie's house. But I even do remember I lived with my grandparents, and I asked my grandma, how come she didn't go to church? And her stance on it was she loved God, she believed in God, but God is any and everywhere that I am, and I can convene and talk to God whenever I want to. I don't have to go to church to do that. And I just took that for that. I never even asked her, well, what's wrong with going to church? Why can't you still go to church? You know? Which I actually regret that now, having been mature and grown, and I would be more curious. I'd love to know about that. But she passed away when I was 21 years old, and I never really got to have any in-depth life conversations with her about any of that. But the way that I had perceived it, or the way that I had always been taught, or it was told to me, God's just like your conscience. It's your right or wrong. You should know right from wrong. And if you don't, God's that little voice back there that tells you what you should or should not do, but you can shut that off and choose not to listen to it. You know, like God wasn't something that no one had ever told me. You can actually be in relationship with them. You could actually make that a staple of your everyday, your life, your breath, your heartbeat, your everything. No one had told me about having a relationship with them.
Right. And I relate to that. I think it's just like, you know, even in my life now, like how I'm curious, like, did my mom and dad believe in God? You know, God didn't enter the picture into my life until we started going to church. That's my understanding of God.
And with us talking the other day when we were having a conversation at the table, it was, I think, eye-opening for you when I had told you that even though I didn't have a relationship with God or didn't know anything about that, God had started stepping into my life very much without me even knowing it or realizing it. I had shared with you that I would get high on meth, or I would do drugs, and then something in me, I'd get an overwhelming feeling, and I would grab my Bible and start reading it. And I didn't know why. I didn't know what I was reading. I would just open it and read it, and sometimes I would just cry.
Yeah.
And I always had this lingering feeling or thinking, we just need to go to church. Just go to church. And we tried a church, you know, a couple times and would go here. But then we would still look at it as, does this church make me happy? Does this fit what I need? Does this fit what I want? And we'd find every reason not to go there.
Right.
So what would you say, or maybe how would you, if you were to describe, what was life like for you as a kid? Because life is so vastly different now that mom and dad have been sober for almost going 16 years. If you were to reflect back before our sobriety and before going to church and becoming believers, would you have anything of how you would describe your childhood?
Well, I think it just felt so normal, even though you guys were like, you know, you would party and there would be a lot of alcohol, there would be violence, there would be just unknown places, unknown people, you know, people in and out. Like, it just felt so normal. And I do know that it got to a point where I'm like, Mom, can you please not drink tonight? You know, so there was be like, oh, I recognize that alcohol causes my mom to act a certain way or my dad to act a certain way, and they act a certain way with each other. And I think it was so normal, and I don't remember. I don't remember if I knew my life looked different than most people. I don't know if I knew that my home life was a little bit more unsettled than most people's home life, because I don't have any memory of like comparing like being at a friend's house and being like, oh, this is what a healthy family looks like. I don't remember comparing or longing. I know that whenever things would get bad, when they'd get to an extreme, it'd be like, oh, I'm scared, like this is scary, you know, like a moment if I, like me and my sister are looking out the window and we see my mom and dad fighting after coming home from the bar, we're like scared of like, should we do something, what do we do, we're crying, you know. But I think that was also normal. I knew the next day they'd be fine, everything would be normal. So I think living that life felt normal, but also there was a lot of fear of like, can you guys just divorce? You guys are miserable, you know. So I knew that it was not healthy, but I didn't have like, oh, but this home is so healthy and so safe. I do have a memory of like almost being embarrassed, and I don't remember if it like enlightened something for me or if I already knew and I was kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't remember the feelings other than embarrassment maybe, where I had a friend that was not allowed to stay the night, and I actually think she wasn't allowed to stay the night because you lived in a trailer park, and so maybe that was more of like why she wasn't allowed to come over, because of that reason, because, you know, parents are particular, I guess, rather than they knew you and knew what your life was like. But I do remember being embarrassed of like, oh my gosh, because of where I live or who I live around or whatever, that a friend is not allowed to come over. And so I remember feeling embarrassed about that.
So just to give a little context, we moved here from California when you were 2 years old.
2002.
I'm glad you remember. Your mom's about to be 49, so you might have to help me with some of the details of remembering this stuff, because your mom's getting to be an old lady. So we moved here from California when you were 2, and then we got sober when you were 9 years old. So there is a little bit also inside that space where I didn't actively drink as a lifestyle, or I didn't do drugs as my everyday lifestyle. I would dabble. I would never say that I did not do these things, but if I were to get into some of my childhood, it was also stuff that was just kind of normal and common. If you felt like doing some drugs, then you did. If you felt like drinking, you did. Like, there was no moral anything telling me that this is not a normal way of life. These are not normal choices, you know? Until I'd say probably about, I think when you were maybe 7.5 to 8 years old is where Dad and my using and life aligned, where it was every day, all the time. It was just had overtaken our whole entire life, and things started going downhill very quick or very fast. So it'd probably be about, I'm going to just lump together 2 years of your formative years where addiction was absolutely what your life was. It wasn't just an in and out kind of thing with
Well, I
some
have a
different
lot
stuff.
well, so you guys got sober when we lived in Yukon, but I have most of my memories of you guys drinking are in Mustang.
Yes.
Which I would have been 4th grade or younger. And so, like, those were most of my memories of wanting, like, you guys separated how many times when we were living in Mustang?
Twice.
How many times did you separate when we were living in Yukon? Once, if that?
Maybe just once, but then your dad and I also tried to do something real wild where we thought we could be completely separate but live in the same house together.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Co-parent and date other people, and that was,
gosh.
yeah, that was absolutely just toxic.
Oh, gross.
Just thinking about it now today, I'm like, why would anybody
Ew.
think that that's a logical thing that you could do?
Hey, money's tight sometimes. You never know, okay?
Your mom is being controlling, and the way that I am, I even tried to draw up a schedule. Like,
Oh my gosh, when
Yeah.
was this?
probably, I mean, we moved to from Mustang to Yukon in 2009, so somewhere like in that time from when we moved there to when we got sober in 2010.
And how long did that last?
Oh, it didn't. It did not work.
Oh, I was just going to talk about how, like, me and my sister were, like, you guys were separated, and we just remember being like, can you guys just get a divorce yet?
You know, and it's funny that you say that because that was actually very impactful to me. We lived in the trailer together in Mustang off of 152, me, you, and your sister. And your dad would come over. He would visit. We would do drugs. We would do things. We would do whatever. And it always ended up in fights or us not getting along or it was toxic. It was absolutely toxic. But what I can say now, if I can explain, is I'd been with your dad since I was 15 years old. And part of my story or my testimony is what I say is, I didn't know how to be his wife anymore, but I also didn't know how to have life without him.
Yeah.
I never had known my life without him. So it was just very weird to even fathom or think about him not being in my life. And we were trying to figure that stuff out the whole entire time where, drinking or doing drugs or trying to find who we were or live separate or different identities, and we just kept being drawn back together. But I remember a time he had came over to the trailer and we got into a fight, and your sister was always more vocal about things than you were, but you would be right there behind her. It was like, yeah, sis, you tell him, you tell her.
Tell her how we feel.
Right. Your sister flat out looked me in the face and said, I'm so sick of this. God, can you guys just get a divorce already?
Right.
And she was probably 10. You were
Right.
probably like 8 years old. And I remember walking away from that and just thinking, God, that speaks volumes. Because most of the time when you talk to children or interact with children, they don't care. They just want their
Right.
mom and dad
Right.
together.
A
They
divorce
just-
is the last thing they
right.
want.
And even if their parents
And we're
get
like, a divorce will fix everything.
Right. They were just like, my God, can you guys just please not leave each other alone?
Right.
Can you just stop?
Right.
And that really did make me stop and think. Now, did it fix anything or change anything? No, but it did start leading me in some of my choices or directions. But that was very pivotal for me to be like, my children are asking
Yeah.
me, they're begging
Yeah.
me to divorce their dad.
Right.
To
Right.
just stop.
And
I
so,
thought,
yeah.
man, that speaks volumes. That means a lot.
Right. So we definitely did recognize, like, oh, alcohol makes them act like this, and this is a problem. Our understanding of drugs, it's like we knew there were drugs, but maybe, like, I don't know. I do remember sis being like, look what I found. And it was a meth pipe. And she, like, went down to the creek and smashed it. And I'm like, I don't really know if I knew it was a meth pipe. Maybe I was like, oh, they're smoking weed. Or, I don't know. I'm like, no, not the weed. It's like
Which
meth.
is like
It's
all
methamphetamine.
part of our culture today, Not the weed.
So I
You're
remember.
gonna become a meme. I'm laughing now. Not the weed.
Not the weed. Not that weed is a great thing for you, but so like we knew alcohol's a problem, drugs are a problem, their marriage is a problem because this is how they are when they're together. But it also was at the same time like normal. It's like, oh, if they get divorced, it'll be better. If my mom doesn't drink tonight, they'll be better. It's like I had no conceptual of like if God came into this picture, he could redeem it all.
Right. And I would even think like, and how many times I know that you've asked me, hey, mom, don't drink. And I'd be like, okay, I won't.
Yeah,
or
empty promise.
I'm not going to get drunk tonight. And how many times do you
Yeah.
think I broke that
Right,
promise?
right. I think that's like something whenever I think back on like my childhood, and I think this is just my personality, that little things let me down. Like little things that would let me down were huge to me. So you saying like, oh, I won't drink tonight, but then getting drunk is like, that was so much bigger than like what alcohol and the outcome of alcohol caused. It's like the empty promise of like, my mom just told me she wouldn't and she did. Like that was like devastating,
Right.
almost so much more, which is so strange, so much more than like my mom being an alcoholic and
Right.
drinking and driving. And it's like,
Well, because in a child's mind, I'm supposed to be your safe person. I'm supposed to be the person you can trust, the person you can rely on, the person that if I say something to you, you shouldn't have to question it, or you shouldn't have to worry or wonder about it.
right.
What's funny is I think most people would probably sit and look at this, or whoever's going to watch or think like, my God, I can't even believe that mom and that daughter are talking like this.
Yeah.
That they're sitting here sharing these things or talking about this stuff. But I think that's what's so important to me, and what matters, or the message I want to deliver to people the most is if you let Jesus enter the picture, that's how we can do this. How you're able to love your mom today and trust your children with your mother today. And this person that, will keep kind of exploring and unpacking some of this is that, how do we even have a relationship today? How do you love me? How do you trust me? When I think there were some times, we had talked about this the other day, that you and I didn't always get along very well. Our relationships were a little bit more bumpy. Sometimes we didn't communicate very well. It just felt like we had trouble connecting sometimes. And you thought maybe it was just you being a bratty, rebellious teen. And I think unconsciously there was this component of, well, there was no respect for me, but why should you? Why should you have respect for your mother? I had to earn that back.
Yeah.
I had to, and it goes back with how many times I broke my promise to you.
Yeah.
I had to tell you when something was going to change or be different. I didn't have to, my words meant nothing. I had to be different. I had to change. I had to let the proof in the pudding, so to say, and live a life of that changed person. And I think that's slowly what restored this, or was making it easier for you to trust me, or to love me, or to have a true relationship with me today.
Right. Well, I think sis was like, not to speak for her, but it was like, I could see her being like on the edge of like, or on the side of like, I have no respect for this woman. And I maybe would have felt more like betrayal of like, so like even a difference of like the way that she was and the way she acted was like, well, I don't respect you. And it's like, not that it was like a lack of respect. Maybe I acted that way because I was a brat. I was a bratty teenager, but it was like maybe deep down I was like, oh, I was betrayed by her, like,
Sure.
So like, I feel like betrayal would be a word rather than like, oh, you didn't respect me. It's like, maybe I wasn't acting with respect, but maybe deep down it was betrayal. But like what you were saying about like, how can we have this conversation? I think your story is something that's like the Lord has done in you so impactfully, is you don't carry shame, which I think some people, even if they've been forgiven and are redeemed, they still are holding on to the shame of what they've done, and you don't have it. Jesus bore your shame on the cross, and you are forgiven and redeemed. And so we can have these things because you were born again and you've been made new, and everything that, and I see you that way. I think both of your daughters see you as made new because you got baptized, you came up, and you lived your life and you honored God, and it was never one way at church, a different way at home. It was just like, okay, you guys were Christians and you were made new and you were redeemed. And so since I was 9 years old, I've seen you as that. And so because of your personality, but also in the way that God has used you in your testimony, there is no shame of what you've done. And so we can say these things because it's not your identity. You don't need to be defensive because this is not who you are. You don't need to carry the shame.
Right.
That's, what you did, and now you get to use it for God's glory.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I guess this would be a little part like we're wishing your sister would be here, because I don't want to keep speaking for her either. But God used both of you in my life more than I could even explain, or maybe even you guys would know. But of course, there's pivotal examples, and there's a part where as a parent or a mom, or maybe you might be able to understand a little bit now, being a mom with my third grandchild on the way, which is amazing. I love it. There still becomes kind of a little bit of a pride or a component in your parents, like, I'm the mom. I don't answer to you. I don't
Right.
have to explain myself. Like, some of that can kind of be in the picture, because we think if we keep this authoritative figure, then the kids are going to listen and be respectful, kind of thing,
Right.
But there were so many times that I did have to put my pride down, because I had to reflect and remember that, yeah, I might be the mom, but as the mom and as a person, these are the things I did, and these are how it affected my children.
Right.
And now it is my job to repair that, no matter
Right.
how it looks.
Right.
And I remember, like we talked about, you're saying being new in Christ and just changing my ways and living the example. Your sister, again, with her voice, which she didn't struggle with telling me the hard things or saying what needed to be said sometimes. And I love that. We still have that relationship today. Standing in my kitchen when we lived in Chantilly, in Cherrywood, and I'm like a broken record. Just, it's going to be different. It's going to be different. Going to be different. And she looked right at me and said, I don't effing believe anything that you have to say, because you're a liar.
Yeah.
And I stopped for a minute. And at first I thought, ooh, I don't know who she thinks she's
Yeah.
talking to.
Yeah.
But I had to take that in, because she's right.
Right.
I had to think, like, why would she think anything different? All I have been is a liar. Why would she believe anything I have to say? So many times I broke my promise to you guys. And I remember looking at her and just thinking, and I told her, I'm like, okay, baby, I hear you. I get it. I understand. And you're not wrong. And from that moment forward, I just thought, I'm no longer going to just try to convince my children. I'm going to show my children.
Yeah.
I'm going to live so differently that I don't have to say anything. And it probably took, and I don't know about you, if there's any part of this story for you that plays a part, but it took your sister about a year before she would actually put her guard down and start truly believing and trusting, to be like, okay, maybe this woman is what she said she is. Maybe this woman is safe. Maybe it is okay for me to live trusting my mom again. Do you have any thoughts or remembers, or if any of that was true for you as well?
Well, I don't remember a lot about, if I were to reflect on, like, whenever you guys first got sober and first started going to church, I don't have many memories of being like, oh, this is so different. Life is so different. Like, of course, I can think my memories of you guys in addiction. This is what we did, and this is what we were consumed with, and now we're in church, and these are the the things we're doing, the ministry and the outreach and all the things. But the initial, like, transition, my, like, understanding of how it was for me was just like, okay, like, now we're going to church, like, that's great, like, whatever, whatever you say. I don't remember just being, like, angry. I just remember being like, oh, okay, we're doing something different now, but I was so young, and I was so, like, moldable. Like, I was the baby sister, and whatever my sister wanted, I would do. Whatever my mom wanted, like, it was just like whatever people want,
Yeah.
And I do remember, like, you guys started going to church but thought that you could still drink, and there was a night where my dad was drunk preaching or testifying to the people that he was drinking with, of, like, how he's different, and, like, life is
All
better and
about
life
God.
is different.
He was talking
all
much
about God,
with
which,
a bottle of tequila
by the end of the
between his
night,
legs.
by the end of the night, the alcohol had hit, and he was, like, back to his old ways. But the beginning of the night, he was drunk, but talking all about God and how God is so good. And I remember sitting there next to you, I don't know if you remember this, and being like, why don't they believe him? It's like, I'm just such a little girl, like, oh, my dad goes to church now, and this is what we believe,
Right.
But it's like, he was not being a representative of Christ. Because he just didn't, it took time to know what is okay and what is not okay.
Yeah. But the next day is where your dad made the choice or decision, and he had said, listen, either we go this way together or we go that way separate. I'm not doing this anymore.
Right.
And that's where actually going to church together entered the picture. And
okay.
always like to tell people this as well, is that sometimes I went to church high, sometimes I went to church hungover, sometimes I left church and went and got high, sometimes I left church and I still got drunk. It wasn't an instant, but I kept going, and I would sit there, and I just felt slowly but surely something was changing. Something was going
Right.
to be different. Something about the people that I was around, the people talking to me, and they never made me feel bad because I was struggling or that I was having these issues or I was having these struggles. It was well, just keep coming back.
Yeah.
Just keep coming back. And that's what I loved, is they loved me exactly where I was, how I was, the way that I was, because they know I can't change her, but Jesus can.
Right.
Let's just support her and love her and make her safe and comfortable to keep coming back here, because we know then Jesus is going to enter the picture and do all the work.
Well, and I love that even though you were told by a family member, like, oh, you don't need to go to church, God is with you everywhere, you know, he's your conscience, and that was your understanding of church. Each time you were feeling broken and feeling like you need something better and higher than yourself, you're like, I think I need to go to church. Like, you just knew the Holy Spirit was pulling you towards church and pulling you towards Him, because the body of Christ is so impactful for those who need restoration and healing and an example of Christ.
Right.
Sometimes the people of God are the first Bible that anybody will read.
Yeah. There's so much we can get into about that, about where God was showing up in my life that I didn't even know or I didn't realize. You know, hindsight's 2020. I can look back now and be like, wow, that was God before I even knew it.
Yeah.
Like, He was calling me to Him. He was leading me to Him. He was bringing me to Him in all these times. But that would be a whole nother segment in itself, because I mean, all of those have such a long story or details. But so, let's kind of just think about maybe just if we were to wrap up a little bit, or even just to think about if there's something that you wanted to tell a parent today, that if you have a history like my mom or you have a past like my mom, it's okay to lay that down and surrender it and not have to live in the guilt or the shame. Or if there's a message that you want to give a parent that might be struggling to think that their children aren't going to love them or they can't repair their relationship with their child, is there something that maybe that you would want to say to them or to tell that parent?
Well, I think I would just say to pray for them. I feel like that's the most powerful thing you can do if you're getting sober and like wanting redemption for your family, like as a whole, generationally. And I think that, you know, people can get sober by their own efforts, like apart from God or the work of the Holy Spirit in them. I think that they can get sober because societal pressure, or, you know, they want their life to look a certain way. They don't want to, like, you know, many good reasons. But if you do it by your own strength, I do think the possibilities of your family being restored in the way that it can be restored in Christ is going to be way different, because there's power in prayer, and just to pray for clarity for you of how to help your children heal and help your children feel loved by you and feel seen by you. Just pray for them, because God can do much more than we can do. God can do much more than you can do, and He can definitely work through you if you're just reliant on that.
Yeah. You know, that is people that have asked me, that have known my past or known my story or known my testimony, and have had the pleasure of knowing you and your sister, to see what great, amazing kids you are. Wonderful people that you've grown up. You have amazing husbands. You've got amazing marriages. You've got amazing kids. You might have had, you know, maybe some choices that you made in your teens or while you're in high school that was just part of growing or whatever, but neither one of you have addiction problems. You don't have an alcohol problem. You didn't, you know, jump from boy to boy looking for your identity. Like, you know, there's all these things that statistically should have been an issue for you, or should have been a struggle for you. And that is just what I tell people, is that, you know, it has nothing to do with me. When people ask me that, Rayanne, how did your children turn out so great? Every single time what I've told them is I remember that I submitted my children to Christ.
Yeah.
When I became in a relationship with God, I had said to Him, these children that you gave me, I tried so hard to mess them up.
Yeah.
Intentionally or unintentionally. All I can do is give them back to you now, because you actually love them more than I do. And I believe God did that for you guys. I believe God did the healing. I believe God worked in your guys' life. I believe God did everything to fix what your mom had broken in you guys. And then He used me to help solidify that stuff by changing me and making me live my life the way that I did. But submitting you and turning you back over to Christ, I think, was the best decision and the biggest impact for this whole entire story. Has nothing to do with me. because I couldn't be more grateful. And I know I've always even told God, if you save my children from everything that I put them through and don't do anything else in my life, there's nothing I need to ask for.
Right.
There's nothing else. And that's too also why I think I spend the majority of my life trying to use my life and my story and my testimony to just help people, but to also give the glory to him, to know that if they're willing, if they're open, if they'll just surrender and submit to his authority and his power, there isn't anything he can't do in your life as well.
Right. I think that everything that we've encountered or witnessed growing up, it's like you're right. Statistically, we could have gone down a way different path. And I think that because you guys started going to church and because you guys got saved and you did have something to turn to, I think it's just God's intervention, the prayer and the surrender, the dependence. Even if you guys started going to church, but maybe didn't bring Jesus into the home, or maybe didn't pray over us or pray over your family and our family, it could have been a different outcome.
Right. Well, thank you very much for being here today, even if it was because the scripture told you to be obedient. I appreciate the obedience, even if it was not because you loved it or because you wanted to do it, but I just thank you for joining us here today. And I think that you have such a powerful story and a testimony. So I'm so grateful that you were willing to come on and just tell your side and your perspective of how things were for you in your life.
Well, I was here to honor my mother and father in Jesus' name.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And remember, always face the sunlight.